So, today is International Women's Day. How many of you have heard of that? Oh, a few people. All right. Okay. So, it is not a festival or commemoration on the liturgical calendar or a holiday that lots of people know anything about. The observance is over 100 years old and lifts up the particular struggles and accomplishments of women around the world today and in the past. I recently attended an event on personal finance. Information was shared that currently women receive 84 cents for each dollar that men receive for comparable work. Some attending were shocked, but I was surprised because of how far we have come. When I was a young adult, it was 64 cents for every dollar. Progress is being made. This observance reminds us of what women have accomplished, the work that is left to do, and all the others who are so often forgotten or overlooked or oppressed, and that includes men too. There are persons who are ignored or mistreated because there are things about them that we do not like or that we fear or that we judge. Things like their educational level or socioeconomic status or who they love or where they were born or so many other traits that we use to divide our neighbors into us and them or label them as worthy and unworthy. So since today's gospel happens to fall on International Women's Day, I thought we should give a name to the Samaritan woman. There is something affirming and inviting to be called by our names. God knows us by name. God knows us personally, intimately, thoroughly. I decided to refer to her as Zita. It is a name with Greek origins and means seeker. We will call it a nickname or write it off as me making things up again. Last week, we heard about Jesus interacting with Nicodemus. This week, we will hear about Zita's encounter with Jesus. In both of these persons, we see that they are established in their own particular faith, yet they still wonder about what God might be doing in their midst. In that sense, they are both seekers, responding to the God who is seeking them. Doing a little comparing and contrasting, we see a man, Nicodemus, a Pharisee, and therefore from Jesus' people coming to Jesus at night. Then we have Zita, a woman, a Samaritan, and therefore an outsider, encountering Jesus at noon. The Samaritans are descendants of the 10 tribes who made up the northern kingdom of Israel and were taken into captivity by the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrians also brought in other conquered peoples, and there was lots of dynamics. Animosity and competition remained between the northern and southern groups, even after, or perhaps especially after, the centuries have passed. That, in an oversimplified way, explains for the Jews of Jesus' day not wanting to go into Samaritan territory. Here ends the biblical lesson for the day, such as it is. Over the years, much has been made about Zita coming to the well at noon. The assumption of coming during the heat of the day, paired with Jesus' observation about her marital status, have led her to being painted as something of an immoral woman who does not want to encounter others. In John's gospel, however, night and day are often subtle allusions to the state of one's faith or understanding. When Judas leaves the supper to betray Jesus, the writer John observes, it was night. Remember from Nicodemus' story how he was confused about what Jesus was saying. In her conversation with Jesus, Zita seems confident yet open to what Jesus has to say. Noon may indicate her readiness to hear what Jesus has to say. When Zita encounters Jesus, he is tired from traveling and presumably thirsty since he asks her for water. He is tired and thirsty, very human. He chose to go through this territory of the Samaritans, even though the Jewish people would normally have walked around it. We read in the gospel that it was necessary for Jesus to do. And that necessary is not as in the road was blocked and he was forced into taking a detour, but necessary as part of his mission. In his conversation with Zita, Jesus treats her with respect as he did Nicodemus. He captures her curiosity with his talk about the living water. With a simple statement, the tired and thirsty, very human Jesus pushes through into Zita's very human and vulnerable story. Go, call your husband and come back. Without judgment, Jesus reveals what he knows about her. This is where we so often jump to labeling her an immoral woman. Perhaps she is. Or perhaps she was divorced so many times because she is infertile and her husband's always wanted to have a son. She could be the victim of domestic abuse. She may no longer have any male members who will take her back in. There is no way for her to support herself. Regardless of how it's happened, she has probably experienced shame and maybe isolation and even humiliation. She may be familiar with others whispering behind her back. Her response to Jesus is guarded, yet she asks very informed questions. She touches upon two of the main conflicts between the Samaritans and the Jewish people: where to worship and the Messiah. Her questions tend to reinforce the divisions that already exist between the two groups of people. On the other hand, Jesus' answers build bridges. Having the right answer does not seem as important as experiencing the freedom to ask the question and see where Jesus leads. Of course, both knowing that God knows everything about us and seeing where God might lead us can be very uncomfortable. We saw that last week in our lesson from Genesis when God called Abram and Sarai to go and be a blessing for others. Not too many other details. We see it in today's lesson from Exodus as Moses and the people are wandering in the wilderness and are thirsty. This is early in their story. Imagine you have been rescued, just been rescued, from a miserable life being enslaved to Pharaoh. You are following this guy Moses, who you thought was an Egyptian, and you really don't know very well, and you don't have much of a relationship yet with this God who's brought you out. You are in a desert where people go to worship the goddess of the moon. There is no water in sight. You are thirsty. Who are you going to follow? Who are you going to trust? Who is your God when you are in the desert? As human beings, we are really skilled at creating gods. That is, gods with a small g. The Protestant reformers were well aware of this. Gods are where we human beings derive our identity, place our trust, and understand our security and value. And those gods take many forms, including family, tradition, addiction, fame, wealth. We can make a god out of just about anything. So when we find ourselves in a desert or confronted by something that challenges our hard and fast answers, who will we follow? Where will we put our trust? Will we be like Abram and Sarai or Moses and take the first step? Will we be like the Israelites in the desert and complain about all the things that we do not have? Will we be like Nicodemus and take the next step even if we do not have everything figured out? Or might we be like Zita, this Samaritan woman? Her conversation with Jesus is so profound that she abandons her task and leaves her water jar to go back and invite her neighbors to meet this man, this potential Messiah. She risks their ridicule and possible further rejection to invite them to come and see. As Dr. Tricia Lyons, the Thorne Sparkman speaker this past week, described this woman, she is the first evangelist or the first ambassador of reconciliation. She may not have all the answers, but she knows she wants to invite others to meet this person who is accepting and offers freedom to ask the questions. The Samaritans invite Jesus to stay with them, and he stays 2 days. John writes this in a matter-of-fact way. He stays 2 days. 2 days! Most Jews would not enter the territory, and Jesus and the disciples stay there for 2 days. Imagine what that must have been like for the disciples. They come back with food, and Jesus does not want any. Do they wonder how their Father's will can satisfy the hunger of a human being? What go through their minds as the disciples watch Jesus interact with these persons that they have avoided, considered the enemy or unacceptable, and see them embrace Jesus too? Are they fearful? Confused? Are they concerned about what to do next? Are they struggling to figure out how these Samaritans fit in with what they think Jesus is about? What if they still do not come to Jerusalem, to the temple for the festivals? There could be lots of questions. Perhaps the disciples come away with a deeper understanding of what Jesus is about. They may see that Jesus is erasing the barriers that divide us, even the ones that we have put into place through our religious practices and ideologies. Perhaps they are better understanding that the starting place for a faithful life is an intimate connection to the God who loves them and calls them. They may understand more clearly that God meets us where we are with our questions and our sufferings and our barriers and our mistakes, and then surrounds us with love and acceptance right where we are. Tricia Lyons, the Thorne Sparkman speaker, also invited us to think about Lent more like the way we think about spring and how soil is prepared before the seed is placed into it. Sometimes that means removing obstacles to make a place where the seed is planted. The image fits well with the gospel acclamation that we have been using during Lent this year. Lord, let my heart be good soil. What work needs to be done on the soil of our hearts? God is at work within us, individually and as a congregation. Here's the thing. God does not look at our resume or our self-identified lists of strengths and weaknesses or ask us to take an aptitude test. God says, "You are my beloved. I choose you. Come." We have work to do. And we should expect to be transformed. Let us join our hearts and minds in prayer. Lord, let our hearts be good soil. Transform us from seeds to plants. Grow us. Help us bloom and produce good fruit, that our neighbors may know you. Amen.